Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. In today's video I'm going to be using my new silicone heart mould from CRASPIRE.com along with epoxy resin and some pretty little bird images to create a vintage wall hanging. If that sounds like fun, stay tuned and enjoy the video. I was recently sent a box of moulds from CRASPIRE.com. CRASPIRE is an online craft store selling a range of products from stamp sets to paper crafts and silicone moulds. They have a massive range of silicone moulds and they ship to many countries around the world, so they are well worth checking out. So just click my link in the video description and check out the discount code as well and go and see what they have. When I opened my package, it was like Christmas Day. There were so many moulds and so many ideas popped into my head as I was looking at them. But for today, I'm going to start off with the heart mould. Now, I've had the heart moulds in the past and always thought it'd be good to be able to put two together to make a 3D heart. But they always had an undercut and you couldn't put two together. Now, this one, as you can see, you can tell straight away it's going to have a completely flat back and I can put two together, so I was really excited about that. The only thing that I wasn't too sure about was when I laid it onto the surface, it didn't lay as flat as I would like it to. It kind of drooped down a little bit at the edges and I knew it would cause me problems when I added the resin if I didn't prop it up at the sides. So as you can see here, I've used a couple of pencils and some lollipop sticks just to make sure it lays flat. I've mixed up some eye crystal resin from Resin Pro. The reason I chose that one is because I need super clear resin for the front part of the heart. And for clarity, this one will always be my first choice. I'm pouring 4 clear hearts and 4 coloured hearts for the background. I made sure that when I poured it, I was very careful and did it very slowly. I kept looking at it from different angles because I wanted to make sure it came right up to the top and it was as flat as possible. I didn't want it to dome because it would make it difficult when it came to attaching the front and the back together. For my coloured hearts, I wanted a kind of creamy colour. I wanted a kind of vintage look to my finished piece. So I thought just white would be too harsh. So I wanted to make it creamy and I decided to use some white pigment paste from Resin Pro. It's the Colour Fun pigment paste and some oxide yellow as well. Just a tiny bit of the oxide yellow after the white. And yeah, it worked out quite nice. In fact, it looked like custard, which made me hungry, but that's another story. So when I poured the coloured hearts, I didn't pour them all the way to the top like I did with the clear ones. It was almost all the way, but not quite. And the reason for that was because I was going to be attaching the pictures and then some clear resin to kind of glue the two hearts together. And I thought that by leaving a little bit of space, that would be the best option. I'm not sure it was the best option in the end, but you'll see what I mean a little bit later on and you can decide for yourself. And there I'm just doing the heart in the top left of that other mould, and I'll probably do it in another video on Instagram or something because I wanted to see what two of those would look like together, but I won't include all of that in this video. I didn't want to use a torch to get rid of the bubbles because I didn't want to damage the mould, so I just used some isopropyl alcohol in a spray bottle and spritzed over the surface. Now I've got a little bit of that creamy resin left and I didn't want to waste it, so I took some pigment powder. It's the Sahara pigment powder and I can't remember the colour. It's kind of a red colour, and just brushed inside the heart that you can see there. I didn't want to just pour the cream into the heart. I thought it would be a bit boring. So I thought if I just brush some pigment powder, it will stick to the surface. And then I poured in the rest of the cream just to get rid of that last little bit. Right then, it's the next day and the resin was cured. I took out the clear ones and left the coloured ones in position. I thought it would be easier to do the rest of the things that I need to do if the cream was still in position. So I've just taken out the clear ones and let's have a look. There you go. Do you see how clear that is? Hopefully you can see. I love that resin. It's brilliant. Anyway, so yeah, I took those all out. And then I took out my spare hearts that were for the leftover, look at that, for the leftover resin. That's so clear. So I'm going to pour another one of those and see what they look like if I stick two together. I thought it might be good for, like, I don't know, at the end of a light pull for the bathroom or something like that. I'm not sure. But yeah, I really loved that heart. I think it's gorgeous. And that one. I don't know what I'm going to do with that one, but it turned out okay, didn't it? It was a good way of using my leftover resin. So let's get on with the project. Right, I wanted pictures of birds in each of my hearts, and I found some really lovely pictures of birds in my Cricut design space, which was quite handy. So yeah, that design space on Cricut is so useful because you don't have to cut them out on there. You can choose the print and cut option, print it out and not cut it, just use it for the printing. And they've got loads of images on there to choose from. So what I've done is I've printed it with my laser printer onto transparency film. Now, if you use a laser printer, you don't need to seal it. It won't run when you put the resin on, it'll be fine. But if you're using an inkjet printer, you will need to use spray varnish on it first. 2 or 3 coats should be enough. And here I've got some nylon thread, which I've had for years and years. So I can't link to the one I've got. But I did look on Amazon, and what you can get is something called nylon beading thread. And I think it's the same thing. I can't promise that. Like I say, I've never bought the beading thread. All I know is that this stuff is really strong and I've had it for years. It's great. And I've got a really long piece of it, and that's what I'm going to use to attach all my hearts together so that they can be hung up in one long strand. I cut a really long piece. It must have been about 1.5 meters because I didn't want it to be not long enough, and I knew I was going to be folding it in half. So the next job was to get a jump ring from my jewellery supplies, and I threaded it through the jump ring, and that's what's going to be used to hang it up from. And then I folded it in half with the jump ring, where the jump ring was, that was going to be the top. So with the thread folded in half, I then proceeded to add 5 clear beads and a little handmade bead from my collection that I'd been hanging on to and I really loved. So yeah, I put that one on the bottom, and then it was ready to start attaching to the hearts. I've got my first clear picture here, and what you can do is just use one of the clear hearts that you've already taken out and draw around it onto your acetate that you've your printed out piece. And when you cut out, make sure it's smaller than the outline that you've traced. You need a space around the edge. I decided that the best way to attach it and also to glue the two hearts together was to use UV resin. UV resin can be cured under a UV lamp in as little as 2 minutes, so it's ideal for this. So I've got my J. Diction UV resin and I'm just applying a touch of it there and I'm spreading it around with a paintbrush. Do make sure that when you use your UV lamp, your paintbrush is somewhere where the UV light can't get to it, because then if it does, your paintbrush will go hard and it'll be of no use. So cover your paintbrush up before you put it under the, your work under the UV lamp. So yeah, there's some UV resin on there and I'm just carefully applying the bed, making sure there's no air bubbles, just easing any bubbles out, and then once it looks like there's nothing, no bubbles under there, you can put it under your lamp for 2 minutes. So now you'll understand why I didn't fill the cream resin all the way to the top of the heart aperture. I just needed that little bit of space at the top for the UV resin. Right, once that was cured, it was time for the next step. And this step is probably the trickiest, and you will just have to learn as you go along, just like I did, because you need to kind of work out the best amount of UV resin to use. And it is quite tricky, I'm not going to lie. You can see how much I've added there. It was possibly a little bit too much. And then once, don't go all the way to the edges, just go near the edges, because when you put the clear part on the front part, it will obviously squash down a little bit. It kind of all depends on how much space you left at the top when you fill in your coloured background layer. That will gauge how much space you have for your UV resin, really. I just used my torch a little bit there to get rid of any bubbles. And then I'm just laying the beads and the nylon thread over the top. With hindsight, I would have done this before adding the picture, because in the finished piece, I could see the nylon thread. I could just see it was there, and it did annoy me a little bit. So really, I should have added that before the picture. You live and you learn, don't you, hey? And at least by me making that mistake, it will stop you from making that mistake, and you will apply your nylon thread before you add the picture. And then once again, I cured it under the UV lamp for 2 minutes. After it's cured, it's time to take it out, and at this stage, if any of the UV resin has seeped out of the sides, you can just use a knife to trim it off, or a nail file, that will work fine as well, and then continue with your beading. So next I added 5 more beads again, 6 including my fancy one, and I repeated the process. It's just exactly the same thing all over again, 2 more times. Right, we're on to the last one, and this one needs to be done slightly differently because I wanted a tassel at the bottom, and so I decided to do it separately. I didn't want to have it all on that same cord because it would have been very difficult to attach the tassel. So let me show you how I decided to do it. I took a piece of the nylon cord and threaded it through the loop of the tassel, and then I folded it in half, and I used that to thread it through the beads, and that allowed me to get the cord easily through each bead, because without that it would have been very difficult to thread the cord through the beads. I was really relieved when it came to pulling the bead over the actual tassel cord, because I did wonder if it would be a little bit too tight, but it was fine. Okay then, this time to attach the nylon cord to the heart, I just added a little spot of UV resin, held the cord in place and cured it, and then trimmed the cord, and I did the same thing with the bottom tassel. With hindsight, I would say this is probably the way I should have done all of the hearts, because that way I wouldn't have had the nylon thread going over the top of the picture. So another option for you if you have a go. Once that was done, I repeated the process from before by adding some UV resin and then adding the clear heart on top, and it was all finished. Well, I say it was all finished. I did a little bit of sanding and cleaning up at the end, but then it was all finished. And here we have the finished piece, and I really love it. I love the vintage feel of it. And it's a shame about the nylon thread showing up, but as I said before, there's a few solutions for that. And yeah, if you use your imagination and pretend that nylon thread is not there, it looks really, really good. And I'm really pleased with it. I think the mould from CRASPIRE was fantastic, and I'm so glad I got them. And I can't wait to try out the rest of the moulds. So stay tuned for other videos using the rest of those moulds. So we've reached the end of the video, and I really hope you've enjoyed it. Maybe it's inspired you to have a go yourself. Don't forget to check out the links in the description along with the discount code for the moulds at CRASPIRE, and I will see you again next time. Bye for now.